Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of JavaScript for Beginners. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about our miscellaneous topics that we may have missed in the previous videos or that I may have just skipped altogether until now. So we're going to go ahead and jump straight into the code. So we want to open up our code folder. So last episode we left off talking a little bit about objects, and I used this example of a people dictionary. We're going to go ahead and remove the code up to here, and of course I left a comment which I will be explaining, because this is a pretty crucial thing, these little gray text here, these comments, and this is just to remind me what to talk about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is something called camelCase, and it's how we name things in programming. If you noticed when I was like function, like add person, I don't know, or let my, or actually my name's not a good one, but let like person age, or let people dictionary. If you noticed, whenever the variable or function or anything really is multiple words, like add person or person age or people dictionary, we start off the word all lowercase, and then for every word after, add person, and then we can say to something. And every single word that comes after the first word has its first letter capitalized. And that is what camelCase is. It's one of the most common programming naming conventions. Another one is called snake case, where we go like let add person to something, which basically we separate the words with underscores. That's most common in Python, and it is sometimes used in JavaScript as well. But most common in many different programming languages, you will see this naming convention, which, yeah. So the second miscellaneous topic that I wanted to cover was constant variables. Now, as we know, variables can be changed. Like when we went let my name is one way to do it, or technically that also kind of works, or like this. But I'm going to actually use camelCase just to set a good example here. Let my name equals and then Matthew. Now, of course, given the way variables work in JavaScript, we can just use another assignment operator, which is this equal, to set something new in it. So we can say hello, and if we print my name, console.log my name, and then we go ahead and copy it down here, and then we save this. Well, if I actually, let me go ahead and open up the live server to show you this in action. Right here, inspect console. Okay. So as you can see here, it prints Matthew first, and then it prints hello. And the reason for that is we set my name equal to Matthew first, and then we reassign it to hello. But what if we don't want to be able to do that in our code? Like, let's say there's this important variable that its value remains constant throughout our program, and changing it could break something. Well, instead of using let to create the variable, we actually use something called const, C-O-N-S-T. And if I set const my name equals Matthew, if you'll notice here, it says uncaught type error, assignment to constant variable. And that comes from this line here. And as you can actually see, it says index.js:7, and that's an indicator. Like, this is called debugging, where we take a look at errors and try to figure out what we did wrong. It says index.js:7, and that gives us a hint. It might be on line 7, which we see my name equals hello. Well, the problem is my name is a constant. And if we change it back to let, it'll work just fine. Now, why would you use this? Say, for example, this is not the greatest example, but say const pi equals 3.14159, and pi doesn't change. So if you changed pi as a constant in our code, well, then that could actually break some stuff. And one note is constants also use a case. So for regular variables, we use camelCase, and for most things in code, or we use snake case. But most often when we use constants, in order to distinguish them, because constants, like people in code don't know if I just write, like, remember when I was going const my name equals Matthew, well, how do people know that the my name variable is constant and I can't reassign it? So when we use constant variables, we use something called screaming snake case, which means it's actually going to look like my underscore name, where everything is capitalized and they're separated by underscores. And that kind of denotes in code, and you'll see this very often, that something is a constant and cannot be changed. Just a fun fact. It uses screaming snake case, whereas regular variables either use camelCase or snake case like that. Regular snake case. So that was the second topic. The third topic, which is it's gonna be input, and I'm actually gonna cover this more in the next series because the next series will be the basics of HTML and CSS, aka the basics of web development, creating simple websites and then using JavaScript to make them interactive. So in order to do input, we are going to say let's say input, or let the input, or actually user input, and then we want to set it equal to, and normally we could set it to anything, but we can say prompt, and then prompt is a function, just like console.log, except we use prompt. And we can say prompt input question mark, and then if we reload here it says input question mark, and we say hello, and then it doesn't say anything, but if we console.log the user input, we can, if we say input and we say hello, notice it prints hello. We reload again, input, type all this, and then it prints all that. So in JavaScript and in websites, this is one way of getting input. And of course in the next series there will be many more ways that we'll learn about, like actual input. Like when you go to a website, you enter stuff in a text field. We're going to learn how to use that as input for our JavaScript code in order to do stuff like maybe make a credit card payment, which we won't actually be doing, but like that's how we use inputs to do that, to search YouTube videos, to do anything really. That's what you use inputs for. The next topic is actually quite important, so I'm going to go over it a bit. So let's say let my name, or let people equals, and then let's go back to that array concept. Remember, to create an array we use these square brackets, and then let's create Matthew, and then James, and then Sarah, and then Joe. So anyone coming to look at our code, like imagine we were saying like we were looping over equals 0, I is less than people dot length, I plus plus, if you remember that means make I equal to I plus 1, it's a shorthand, and then console.log people I. Well, someone coming along and taking a look at your code might be like, why are they doing that? Like, what's the point of this code? And honestly, like, me coming from my knowledge, I know, okay, we're creating a people array and we're looping over it, but if I'm new to the program, I would be thinking, why are we doing that? So one way, in fact, a most common way for programmers to kind of explain their thought process is they use something called comments. And in JavaScript, comments are 2 forward slashes like this, and then the whole line is a comment. Or for a multi-line comment, we can do a star slash, or a slash star, my bad, and then go to another line and then type in star and then slash. And then everything in between those two are all commented. And you'll notice in most editors they'll go gray, and that way essentially comments are discarded. When the code, when it's trying to look at your code, the computer, and it's looking at what to do, every time it sees a comment, it literally just skips it. It discards it. The program doesn't care. And really, comments are for humans, because what's harder than a computer not being able to read your code is another human, another developer not being able to read your code, and that causes slowdowns. It makes costs money and all that kinds of stuff when you don't have good communication on the team. So of course, one good way is say like we want to loop over and print the people in this list. Now this is not a very good comment because even now I still don't know why, but I mean this is in kind of a arbitrary example. I really don't know why we want to loop over these people, but in certain programming problems I have done something like this. But maybe I was creating like an email list and I wanted to loop over each email and send it. Well then in that case we would say loop over each email and send, or loop over each email string and send a message or something like that. And that would actually explain what the code is doing, but not this code, because this code doesn't do that. Anyways, that has been comments, and the last topic is math. And in JavaScript, there are many math functions. You type in math with a capital M, and this is how, for example, let me go ahead and print math.random times 5. And what this does is it creates a random number between 0 and 5. Stuff like that. Like you can use math.random to generate a random number, or If you wanted to say go math dot round and then round the number 4.87, it will round to 5, for example. Or math dot floor 4.87, it'll round to 4. Like it has a ton of these random math related things that might be very useful. And in order to actually use this, this is called a JavaScript standard library, like kind of functions, the math part of the standard library for JavaScript. And the way to learn about all of these things that comes with the language is you can search up on Google JavaScript math documentation. Now, what we're looking up here essentially is the name of the programming language, JavaScript, and then math, which is the name of the module. We go math with a capital M dot, and then to get all of these cool things. And then documentation essentially is like, it explains, it's documents that explain how to use it. So the first thing is developer.mozilla, which is the creators of Firefox. They have a lot of documentation on JavaScript specifically and a lot of web programming languages. And if you come here, you can see all of this stuff. Math.abs returns the absolute value of x. Math.acos returns the arc cosine of x. These are trigonometry. Math.floor returns the largest integer less than or equal to x. And this is all math stuff. Of course, like you might have to know like math terminology, but if you need these types of functions, they're here, right here in the math library for JavaScript. And remember, the way you look up that stuff is JavaScript math documentation. And there are many different modules that, like, when we get into future things, we're going to use different modules, different like libraries of code that we will draw from, code that other people wrote that does cool stuff. And you just have to look up JavaScript blank documentation, like anything. If we're going to use like the FS, like the file system from Node.js, well, JavaScript FS documentation, and it comes all of this stuff, and this shows you all of the code that comes with that module and shows us how to use it. So that's just a cool thing to know, is looking up documentation, and it comes really in handy. Like when I was creating Discord bots, I would go discord.js documentation. Boom. Like, and this is a way to write Discord bots with JavaScript, and then you can search up and look at all this documentation here. So these have been the miscellaneous topics on JavaScript. I hope you enjoyed. There are, of course, I think, a couple other miscellaneous topics, but these are the main ones that I could think of that I kind of missed for this JavaScript for Beginners series. I believe in the next video we're going to actually be going over a project to kind of tie all of the knowledge that we learned together so far. So to recap, camelCase is a naming case that you have the first word lowercase, and then every other word there's no spaces, but it has an uppercase letter to start. Constant variables are, instead of using let, we type in const, and then we name it, and then equals, and that means we can't change the variable's value. Input, we can use prompt, so let my name equals prompt, and then you give it a question to ask, and then, whoops, didn't mean to do that, and then whatever the user types in will go into the variable. Comments, double / and or / and then */, and we could put anything in here for other humans to read and understand. And then math, of course, math has a ton of random functions that we can use, like this, and they all do different things related to math, and there are many other modules just like it for other things. So if you happen to miss any of the previous videos in the series, or if you want to see other videos in the series, go ahead and check out the playlist linked in the description where I'll be uploading daily. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, hit the bell icon, and subscribe to get notifications whenever I upload new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.